Hi everyone and welcome to Curly and Yarny. As always, my name is Milena and in today's video we will be talking about weaving, and we will be specifically talking about the weaving of this scarf that took kind of forever. So let's get started. So today's video will be the journey of making a scarf that does not exactly goes according to plan. So when I started this project, I thought I would be done within a few weeks. It turns out it took me a few months and almost a year. Although sometimes in other videos I bragged to be able to weave a scarf in one day. Here it's more like one scarf in 1 year. But I don't want to be complaining during this video. I really just want this video to be fun, and I want to do a little recap of this weaving journey. So and I want to take you along with me, so jump on board on the weaving of the 1 year scarf together. So let's get started. So since that this project happened over the course of 1 year, I'm going to go through its history month by month. So first of all, let's start with the first month. So this project started in April 2022. So on that month, I've actually just finished weaving some samples. So I wanted to try a draft pattern that I found in this book, The Hand Weaver's Pattern Directory by Anne Dixon. And the draft pattern that I did was the one we can find on page 81. So I did the threading that can be found on the top of this page, and I did the different threading that we can see on the page, and I did some others. I just tried different things and I messed around with the threading. So once I got this all off the loom, I got very inspired by the motifs it created and the pattern it created, and I wanted to weave a scarf with this pattern. So I took out all of my yarn, all of my threads, and I started to brainstorm on what I wanted to make. And I ended up with two different options. So there was this option number 1 and option 2, and I couldn't decide which one I wanted to weave the most. I thought that two of them would be very nice. So I put this decision up for vote, and it was you guys that would have the power to decide what a project would be woven on my loom. So this is for April, so I put the vote up. So the two options were, well, option 1, the option that won, but more on that later. So the option that number 1 was the deep sea blues. So my idea was to have a black warp made out of 8-2 cotton, and also a blue weft made out of 8-2 Tencel, and this would remind me of like the look of the oceans and the waves, but like in the deep oceans. Then my second option was to have a cotton warp, but this time out of the natural color, but still again 8-2 cotton. And for the weft, I would have used some Tencel yarn again, but this time in the color Havana, so like Havana. And with this project, the name of this option would have been A Day in the Desert. So those were the options that I laid out for you guys, and I put this to a vote on YouTube but also on Instagram. And this is it for April. And then the next month was May, and during that month I was actually traveling, so I did not do much weaving during this month. So on my part, nothing much happened, but on your side, votes were coming in, and they kept coming until June. And then in June, the votes kept coming in. But by the end of the month, this is when I draw the line, and this is when I started to count all of the votes that I got. And I kept that a secret for a few days until the month of July came up. And And then in July, I host a live video at the beginning of the month, and this is when I was able to declare which option was the winner, and it was option 1. And to my surprise, the votes were pretty equal. So funnily enough, on Instagram, the option that got the most votes were the day in the desert option, and then on YouTube it was this option that received the most vote. And when I say it was pretty equal, it's like 50-50. There was only one vote that was basically the decisive vote, and that decided for this scarf. So for the person who casted that last vote, I don't know who you are, and you probably don't even know it yourself, but you actually were holding so much power in your hand that day when you pressed the deep sea blue option. So in July, I had a winner, I had a project, so I was able to start. So first of all, I made my warp, and I was working full-time, so I had to do this on all the spare time that I had. So I warped some nights and some days. Then by the middle of the month, I finally had a warp to put on my loom, and I started winding the warp onto the loom. And back at that time, on my Meko loom, I had a sectional beam, and I did not have the proper tools to warp it. I don't have a tension box or a spool rack, and so I had gotten a rattle kit, and I know it is possible to do it this way, but I just kind of tried to wing it, and it was a bit of a painful warping process. I didn't really enjoy it so much, and I was starting to get a little bit fed up by the sectional beam, but I just kept going. Then by the end of the month, all of the warp was on the loom, so I was able to start the threading. However, at that time I also started to experience quite a lot of back pain, especially in the lower back. Then I had to take many breaks, and I couldn't do it for such a long time, and so this process got kind of longer and longer. It felt like forever. And then August came by, and I was still not done with the threading of the loom. And then I was able to start slaying the reed, and this went by pretty seamlessly, so probably the easiest part I had done on this loom so far. And then by the end of August, I attached my warp to the front bar, but since that I had been struggling so much winding my warp to the back beam, I kept nourishing some doubts inside of me, and those doubts were that my tension would probably be bad because of the sectional beam and the way that the threads roll into the back beam, and I was feeling very insecure about this whole warp situation, and I was very feeling insecure that I would actually be able to weave something, like the warp would be nice all the way through. So I decided that this was enough. So after I had attached the warp to the front bar, I actually decided that I would remove the back sectional beam. I started to roll the whole warp onto the front beam because I didn't want to lose all of the threading I had done, nor the slaying the reed. After I had rolled all of the warp to the front, then I was able to unscrew the sectional beam at the back of the loom. I had to sand it down a little bit because the screws on the sectional beam actually damaged my beam quite a lot, and without the sanding, I believe that the little piece of wood would have damaged my threads. Then I put the normal rod back onto the back beam, attached it with the wires. I attached the threads to this rod, and I was ready to wind this wire back onto the back beam. And so when September arrived, I started the weaving, but I also started to realize that I had made some mistake into my threading, and so I had to correct those mistakes. So it didn't take me so much time to correct them. There were, I think, only 3 of them. It was kind of expected that I would have mistakes in this threading since I had done it over such a long period of time. Most of the time I would get distracted because of all of the breaks I would take, so mistakes were bound to happen. So yeah, I had to correct them. It was just like this one more nail in the coffin for me to be like, oh my god, is this warping process ever going to stop? This is just taking forever. Mind you, by that time I had just started school plus work, so I was kind of like very busy, and I just wanted to be done with the project and to be done with the warping basically. So this was pretty much my mindset for September. So correcting mistakes and being a little bit, not fed up with the project, but you know, just like a little bit annoyed. So by the end of the month, the loom was finally ready to weave, but I don't think I was ready. So in October, the weaving officially started, and it started out a little bit slow. So my idea for the pattern, since that I only had one color in my weft, I really wanted to play out with the threading, and I wanted to put in as many of the patterns that I tried that I could have. And for those patterns, I wanted them to have kind of a logic into them, so I wanted to start off with like the most simple option of the pattern, which would make those kind of zigzags, and then those would eventually transform into the little diamonds, and then those would fade out into the zigzag again, and then this would become the bigger part of the pattern, so where there's like this double diamonds, and I would like transition in between those patterns. So this video focuses more on the adventure behind the making of this scarf, and if you wanted to have more detail on the draft pattern that I use, and also on the yarn that I use, and all of the measurement of this scarf, well, I will provide all of those details on my website for free. So I will provide a link to this page on the description down below, so feel free to go and check it out. So I wanted this to look very organic, but at the same time I wanted it to be like very precise. So I put myself into kind of a very rigorous process of noting everything I was doing, and this took out a lot of the fun in it. So again, just to put you in context, during that time I was at school, I was learning so many things during the day, and I was doing some projects that required a lot of my concentration, and then going back home and having to do the same again on this project was coming a little bit too much for me, and I was always kind of dreading the time I would have to go to this loom and start weaving and note everything I was doing, so I kind of not did it that much. And then came November, and the same feeling of this project being kind of a chores for me, kind of a task for me, stayed. And so by the end of this month, I only had about 1/4 of the project done. And then December came along, and I realized that this project had been on my loom for so long, and I realized that if I didn't weave it during the month of December, this would actually live on to the next year. And I thought, no, this needs to be done for 2023. This needs to be done within the same year. But then I had this huge table runner project on my rigid heddle loom. At the same time, I was dealing with all of the end of semester projects at school, and then the holiday season came along, so all of the preparation for that, and then I barely touched the loom. then the next year came along, and with this new year, when I started off January, I thought new year, new me and new project. So I started to change a little bit the scope of the project and change my view of this project. So instead of controlling every aspect of it and taking note of every inches of it, I decided to just let it all go, and I decided to just weave as I wanted to weave, and just like weave as I go basically, and switch patterns anywhere I wanted it to switch. When I decided to do that, everything kind of fell in place very rapidly, so I started to have a lot more fun, and I basically finished the weaving of the scarf in one sitting pretty much. Now we are in February, and I am able to share the project with you. So I'm very glad to be able to do this. So making the YouTube video about it is actually for me the way to close the chapter of this project. So in total, it took me almost 10 months to do everything from start to finish. At some point I thought maybe I should postpone twisting the fringes and just wait a little bit longer, and then it would really be 1 year. But I decided no, this is enough. I need to finish this. So as this video ends, I really want to share with you the final effect. So I want to share with you if all of those efforts were worth it and they were worth it. And I'm really happy on how this scarf turned out. So I feel that with the dark warp and my shiny weft, the scarf really has some kind of a velvety effect. It really just shines and gets darker and lighter when we move it around. I also like the effect of my pattern disappearing and appearing. So when we look at it, it's always interesting. So we never really know what kind of pattern we will see, but it all makes sense together and it's all very coherent. So I'm happy that this turned out. There's maybe one part that I am a bit more disappointed for the project, and you might have noticed this already. So in the clips where I was weaving the scarf, you might have noticed that there was this line in between, almost in the middle of the scarf, and this line was created because the threads there were more tense than the rest of my warp. So this was really uneven, and I was a bit surprised that this was the only place that I had this problem, to be completely honest. I mean, this warp had been through a lot, and it's been going around and around and back and around and back twice. So I thought that I would have way more tension issues than that, but this was the only one. And as I was weaving, I thought, do I correct it or just I go along with it and see what happens? And this is what I decided to do. And I was wondering if or how this would show on the final scarf, and the if is that yes, it does show, and how it is, well, at least it's in the middle but we do see it a little bit. I don't know if anybody would see it or if it's just me, because I know it's there. So there's an imperfection there. For next project, if ever this happens to me, I will try to correct it, because it's not necessarily something that I'm happy about for my final project. Throughout of my weaving journey, I often try different things. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. I definitely tried different things when warping this loom, and it didn't exactly turn out how I wanted to, but I feel like I've learned so much from this experience, and even though at some point it might have been a little bit irritating, I'm glad that I pushed through, and now today I look at this with a smile because I'm glad of all the learnings I've made. And I tried to be very transparent, and I tried to show you that I still make mistakes a lot. so much for being here with me today, and I hope to see you soon in the next video. Bye bye.